In recent centuries, there have been those who have recommended time with animals. This isn't only about children having a pet and learning about the responsibility of caring. This is about the profound health benefits that some of us discover through animals. In 1859, nurse Florence Nightingale even said a small animal was important for someone who was sick, especially with a long-term condition. Today, horses, chickens, guinea pigs, even fish can be used in animal-assisted therapy. So how does it work, and what about the animals' welfare too? I'm Vicky Gibbens, and for this Life Issues, I'm joined by Colley, owner and founder of the business Hope's Therapy Dogs. Your beautiful daughter Hope is recognised in your organisation's name. Ali, would you kindly tell us about what Hope was like?
She was vivacious. She was a party animal. She loved people and was the child that wanted everybody to be okay. At the age of 7, she independently asked to be baptised in the Christian faith, which turned out to be just before the diagnosis of her brain tumour. And her faith was her rock throughout her illness and astounded many, and actually continues to be part of my inspiration today. She had relationships with adults and children alike, and wanted nothing more than to teach people about Jesus and help their hearts to be okay.
And what a name that you had already chosen for your daughter. How did that come about?
Very simply, praying about it before she was born. God told me that her name was Hope Esther, and hope being that she was a bringer of hope, and Esther because the biblical princess Esther, whose name meant star, which so to a family she became our little star. But actually there's something said of Esther in the Bible where it says she was born for such a time as this. And I prophetically believed that hope was bringing hope for such a time as this. I believed it would be in person. I believed she'd live to be an adult. But since her death, her name's evermore rung true. And I can see God's hand even in that.
And Ali, what was the rest of family like? Did Hope have siblings?
So we were late to have children. I was 35 when I had my eldest boy, who is now 18, so you can work out how old I am. And we'd thought we couldn't have children. So Joe came along, and then within a year, Hope was born. And then another 2 years after that, my twins, Elijah and Ethan, were born. So at very early stages, I had 4 children, aged 3 and under, which was a challenge, and people used to laugh at me, but I was delighted with it. I never felt anything other than blessed to have 4 children. I loved having 4 children. I loved the chaos. I loved their individual characters. They're all so different. Joe and Hope were great friends from the day they were both together. And Hope mothered Ethan and used to play silly games with Elijah. They all had a different part, as you know, with children. They all have their own unique place in the family, and without them, there's a hole. So for the first 7 years, we were just delighted to have the children. It was a blessing. We'd never had a lot of money, so we'd do, which was fine. And I used to, take them to parks. We used to go jumping in muddy puddles, we have lots of silly family times. And then when she was sort of 6 going on 7, she started to show symptoms, but they were random symptoms. So things like a bit of nausea in the morning, bit of dizziness, bit of sort of unable to get a balance. She was writing her letters back to front and things like this. But then towards the Christmas, as she was diagnosed on the 2nd of January, she was being sick every morning, and lying on the couch, very lethargic, just not herself. She'd started to get anxious around friendships, which was just not her. And I rushed her to A&E on the 2nd of January, 2016, and she was instantly fast-tracked through A&E. Amazing consultant who I'll never forget and looked after us. And we received the diagnosis that day that Hope had a brain tumour. And then a couple of weeks later, that it was the worst kind of brain tumour on a brainstem called medulloblastoma, and that she was in the fight for her life. So we then had 2 years of cancer treatment, which we were told was the worst, most rigorous cancer treatment anybody could have, let alone a child. She had to have radiotherapy for 6 weeks initially to her brain and her spine, and then she had to have 8 months of chemotherapy, very intensive chemotherapy. And we thought she was in remission, but because during the process, she'd lost function, she was unable to, there were things about her movements that had changed. And we'd seen the impact of a therapy dog she met in radiotherapy. The way that this therapy dog had got her through radiotherapy, the therapy dog's handler had understood what Hope needed. We'd promised Hope her own therapy dog, and Hope was expecting this little dog, Pippa, who you can actually see behind me, the brown and white one, to come and be part of our lives. And then received the news that she'd relapsed. So we were left with this dilemma: do we go ahead and get a puppy, knowing what cancer treatment did in terms of the need to be outside the home, the need to be in hospital, you're not there. But in a conversation with the oncologist and families and friends, together, we decided that we were going ahead and getting Pippa, and we had support in place to help us look after Pippa. So Pippa came into our lives, and for the first 9 months of Pippa's life, she was Hope's therapy dog. Towards the end of Hope's life, Hope, knowing that she was going to die, asked me to train Pippa to be a dog that helped other children and other people. And which was very much in character. It was who she was. She'd seen what Pippa had done for her. She wanted to share that. So when I felt like I could, after Hope had died, I trained Pippa to be a volunteer therapy dog for one of the volunteer organisations. And I also took a job in a school, a behavioural special school, and did loads of training, both in dog training and in children, working with children and therapeutic work specifically, and trained to handle or to do animal assisted intervention. And 2 years later, I set up Hope's Therapy Dogs.
Ali, if I can, let me take you back to that initial diagnosis with Hope. As you said, you've got a young family, you were juggling an awful lot. I wonder if you can remember what thoughts you were trying to process and how that impacted your relationship with God.
I think initially, obviously, you hit with this wall of this life's changed overnight, and now you've got a crisis to manage. That's how I function. Now, one thing I've noticed with cancer, and it's very similar to other journeys, everybody's journey is different. So, and every parent with cancer will share some similarities and some differences. My approach was very much, right, I can see that this is going to, we've got to now focus on hope. And I think one of my fears was what's going to happen to my three boys, because I knew instantly that I was going to be outside of the home a lot. Didn't know how much, but I knew it was going to be a lot, and that our family was going to be fragmented. Thankfully, my own parents and my sister and her husband stepped in, um, and helped us to look after the children. So as a family, and then at the time, the church that we were involved in also stepped in with meals and things like that. So practically, that's how it was handled. And I was just focused very much on dealing with the crisis. That's how I manage. That's how I roll. And when you ask me how my relationship with God was impacted, I genuinely, I never at the time questioned God. I knew that he was in control. He'd spoken to me a couple of weeks before Hope was diagnosed. And so I knew that something was coming. But he'd actually said the words, "Hope will be well." And it's important. So that carried me through, actually. But it also meant that I believed that she was going to live. And very much, I think, part of my journey is that we see through a glass darkly. So we hear things from God and we see, and there was a lot in my journey where I stayed close to God. I stayed in worship. We used to have worship music on in the house. It wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, and I would never sit here and say we have the perfect faith and the perfect family. No way. That's not it. But there was an overriding sense that God was with us and he was in it. And at the time, I believed Hope would be well and she'd be healed. Just to give you the caveat of that, and aware that we've got a short amount of time to talk. When we lost Hope, I was bewildered, because I'd heard clearly, not just once, but several times, Hope will be well, and there were different things. And it had meant that I'd not prepared my children for her death. And that was horrifying to me, because suddenly Hope had died and I had these three boys and I had to talk to them about Hope now having died. So I apologized to them as I was telling them that Hope had died. And I said, "Look, I'm really sorry, boys. Mummy has somehow got it wrong and I don't know how I got it wrong." But obviously I have. And my eldest, who was 10 at the time, looked at me and he said, "But Mum, Hope is well." And in that instant, it was this eternal timeline just in place. And oh my goodness, yes, I didn't want Hope to have died. I would have done anything as her mum to have kept her on this earth. But I knew without a shadow of a doubt that that life was a drop in the ocean, and that Hope had run a race, and that the Lord had healed her, and that she's now with Jesus. And actually, towards the end of her life, Hope saw Jesus a few times. He came to visit her. She would never tell me what he'd said to her. And I knew that she was with her Saviour and she'd finished. So despite the grief and my pain, I was also delighted, because my daughter, she wasn't suffering anymore. She didn't have to face the things we have to face in the world, because she'd already done it and she'd run a race well. Now, there's a huge journey since she's died, and a lot that's happened, if you ask me about my faith. But they're the moments, I suppose, I remember during her illness and at the end.
Just thinking through, for anyone who is in perhaps a place of loss today or experiencing that suffering, you've spoken about how it did take time to process all that had happened with Hope before you even started to consider what perhaps God was calling you to and your outreach with therapy dogs. What helped you during that part of your life initially?
I think, uh, um, well, for a start, I've got to be honest, I didn't necessarily think God was, think that I have a light bulb moment where I thought God is calling me to work with therapy dogs. I didn't. I, in that first year after she died, I literally took one day at a time. I obviously my background and a lot of training I'd previously done, I did understand from an educational point of view that what the process was that I now needed to go on. So I knew that I didn't have to put pressure on myself. And I knew that I had to be okay for my children because I was now focused on the three boys. And I was very focused on that and that they needed to be okay and that they needed to feel like their world was okay. Um, so I would, in terms of faith, I didn't put pressure on myself to be praying endless prayers and doing countless Bible studies. I would say help God and be okay with that because I, I often think about Psalm 139 where he has searched us and known us. He planned our days when as yet there were none of them. And I used to sort of, if anything, say it back to God. Well, Lord, you saw fit for this to happen in my life. Therefore, I'm expecting you to get me through this. Don't know how and don't know why, what's going to happen, but I'm expecting that you'll get me through this. So that was part of it. I also just did the things that I felt I could cope with. I wasn't out to get any big ministry. I'm still not, if I'm honest. But it's about he knows the way I take. A man's heart plans his way, but God directs his steps. We know all that. We put one foot in front of the other, and that was my first year. I was putting one foot in front of the other. So for a little while, about 4 months, I did dog walking for people, and I just walked the dogs and walked for miles, miles and miles for like a whole working week. I'd be walking. Um, and obviously in that time God can be with you, God's with you and you're on your own, so you're in your own thoughts. I I just did what was in my hand to do. I couldn't face going to full-time work initially, although we needed me to go back to work. Um, but I thought, well, what can I face? So I did the things that I thought I could do, which was the dog walking. It was also, well, I can train Pippa. So I trained Pippa. I could volunteer. So I used to go into the school that had been Hope's school and spend a couple of hours with the children that had been in Hope's class and talk to them about loss. Um, and then when I felt I could do something, I didn't think I could go back to radiography, which had been my profession. Couldn't face it. It's hospitals. I didn't want to go into hospitals. So I thought, what can I do? Well, I can go and work. This job came up that was to be a therapy dog handler in a school. I thought, well, I can do that because it's a dog. And it's like it's a part-time role. I can do that. Okay, well, I'll do that. And it was literally just those little steps. But along the way, the rest kind of fell into place. Um, and I think that's, with grief, I think very often, or sometimes people can try and do everything all at once. Sometimes people's reaction can be, I need to fix this, I need to make it all better. And it's just that understanding that when loss has happened, we can't make it all better. We can't take it away, not even as Christians, not even people of faith. You can't go to a church and have somebody take away your pain in the sense of take away that physical pain of loss. However, we know someone who can hold us in the pain, and that's the difference. And it's having that understanding, as if you're a person of Christian faith, that despite the weight of the pain that we're in, we have a Saviour who holds us in that pain and is there with us as we process it. And that's where the peace comes, because we don't have to fight it. We just need to put one foot in front of the other.
Ali, we want to hear all about your wonderful team, including your four-legged friends. But take us back to when Hope first of all met the lady and the dog handler in hospital. What was that experience like?
So it was unexpected. Um, we had the Clatterbridge Hospital team at the time were amazing. There was a radiographer called Hannah who was just gorgeous and so lovely to Hope, just exactly what Hope needed. And then Sue and Callie, Sue was the handler and Callie was the border collie, and just came one day and introduced themselves to Hope and made friends with her. And Hope just, because she was an animal lover, because she loved dogs, and this dog was there for her, and this dog made a fuss of her, and Sue knew how to relate to Hope. It wasn't that Sue was doing therapy, she wasn't a trained therapist, but she was a loving person. And she actually, we learned later on, was also a Christian. Um, but she just came on a daily basis to meet with Hope when Hope was going into her radiotherapy. So the focus shifted from Hope having radiotherapy, which actually caused things like skin burns to her skin. And I mean, within the first couple of weeks, she'd lost her hair from radiotherapy. We'd had to shave because it fell out. Like, it's not like when it falls out with chemotherapy, and that's horrible. And I'm not, but with radiotherapy, it didn't just fall out, it kind of melted onto her head. So it went crispy, and we had to kind of talk her through shaving her head, which she decided she would do. Um, so those things were all horrific. She had to wear a wire mask that came up to her shoulders, and it was close fitting, and it would pin her down to the table. Now, Hope was 7 at the time, and I remember when they said that that's what they had to do. They actually had to go for it to be molded, and then they had to fit it. I thought, how do you? I mean, Hope was a really good kid. She never put a foot wrong. She was compliant, but I thought, how are you going to get a child to have that pinned to you, pinned to your person, and then lie still in a room without your parents? Because essentially, when the radiotherapy was happening, parents can't be in there. It's too high a dose of radiation. So the child has to be in there on their own and lie still. I was like, I thought, no way. And they said, it's okay, we'll do it. And the dog went in with her. They didn't stay in with her. Don't make sure I'm saying it right. But the dog was allowed in for the first time, to help Hope relax. And Hope just, with this dog, just she took it, and she went through the process bravely. But I think that having the therapy dog there took those horrible experiences and gave her light, and gave her fun, and enabled her to look forward to going. She loved going to Clatterbridge. It was a different story when she was going to the children's hospital, and I think the difference was the dog,
Mm.
and the fact that she knew that that dog was there for her. Um, yeah, so it was amazing. And Sue and Callie came because Hope had to have a second round of radiotherapy in the second year, which was about 5 or 6 weeks again, and the dog was there for her for that second round, which again helped her, because Hope was really really poorly by that stage.
It is remarkable what you describe and Hope's strength, because it must have been such a frightening experience knowing that it wasn't just a one-off radiotherapy session, to have to keep going back as you describe, and that separation just from you and dad as well, and having that treatment. Um, Tell us a little bit more about how does it work, animal assisted intervention, because there is a lot of research within this field and it is acknowledged, isn't it, by the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy.
Yeah, so I describe it simply, really. It's the people that have animal assisted intervention build the relationship with the animal first. The animal becomes a bridge to that communication. Now, one of the things that across the therapeutic world is vitally important is this term called unconditional positive regard, which is where you are just accepted for who you are in the place you are, regardless of what you are exhibiting at the time. And as human therapists, oh, we try to give unconditional positive regard. But I defy any therapist to tell me honestly that they have always given 100% unconditional positive regard to every client they've worked with. It's just impossible. As human beings, try though we might, and we do try, and professionally, that's what we are expected to do. We're never going to be perfect at it. But with animal assisted intervention, particularly my particular area, which is dogs, they accept a person at face value, regardless of what has gone before. They don't care. They've just got this person in front of them and they give that unconditional positive regard, which is where clients can actually rest and be at peace in a session. Sometimes that's all it takes. Other times it's building the relationship with the therapist through working with the animal. And we do all sorts of things. We use play, we use interaction with the dog, we do tricks. I mean, with children, we can do all sorts of fun and games, always mindful that we want the dogs to enjoy it too. One of the things I'm very passionate about is making sure that the animals we work with, the dogs, are always happy to be doing that job, because you can train an animal, particularly the more malleable breeds, to do what you tell them in a therapy session, but they might not actually be enjoying it.
Mm.
And what we want is we want the dogs to come to work and have fun with us. And actually, if we do that, our sessions are more successful because it becomes a two-way street. It's a learning curve for the clients sometimes as well. How do we help this dog to have fun? How do we help the dog to feel more relaxed? What can we do here? There's lots to it.
Well, I know that obviously your specialty is in dogs, but others might be familiar with horses being
Yes.
used. I've heard of guinea pigs,
Oh,
even
all
fish
sorts.
in some
Yeah.
circumstances. It's incredible. But
Yeah,
then there again, God has created us to have
absolutely.
that bond with animals and creation.
Yes, yeah, totally. It makes me smile, actually. In the very beginning of time, Adam and Eve in a garden, what were they surrounded with? Not crowds of people, loads of animals. I'd have loved to have seen it myself. I think, oh, that would have been amazing. And I often think about Hope in heaven, surrounded by a farm or a zoo.
But of course, this is something that can be offered through the NHS. Of course, the therapy may not be suitable for everyone if an individual has allergies, but I know not only children, adults can benefit from it as well. And so, tell us a bit about where this has ended up for you, because of course, I guess part of what you offer is the expertise, which means that you've had to jump through some hurdles when it comes to training and gathering that depth of understanding around mental health particularly.
Yeah, so I am a trained therapist and I'm also a certified animal assisted intervention specialist, which means that I've done the training and I've qualified to um, do what we do. Um, so I think one of the first things I worked out was that currently in the UK, it's not a regulated field. From a due diligence point of view and a therapeutic point of view, I realized very quickly that we need to be qualified and we need to understand what we're doing, both for the well-being of our clients, but also the well-being of our dogs. So one of my passions since I started has been to do this ethically and to do it in a way that is right. So we at Hope's Therapy, I started out and I trained myself at the time. There wasn't formal training in the UK, so I went to America to get my formal training. And I did a lot of other, I became a dog trainer and I added to my therapeutic qualifications as well. And that is ongoing because actually, as a therapist, you should always be polishing your skill set, if you like. And as an animal assisted specialist, you should be doing the same. And so that was me, and I was constantly studying. But then as demand for my services grew, I realized on my own I couldn't fulfill the demand and that I needed to bring in staff. So we brought in, I brought started to bring in staff, but realized they needed training too. So we developed our own training program within the organization. So we have a training program for um, animal assisted intervention specialists, and we also have a training program for schools, so that schools can understand how to bring a dog into school safely, because there's lots of things to consider. Um, I mean, for it, a lot of people say they've got a therapy dog when actually they're an emotional support dog. So it's understanding the terms we use. And a therapy dog is a dog that does a job of work in a particular place. So, for example, in a school or in a hospital, the dog will go in with you and do its job like we do our job. And then when they go home, they're at home and they're not a therapy dog at home, they're a pet. An emotional support dog, on the other hand, is a dog that just is one person's dog, and they provide an emotional strength for that one person. So there's lots of differences and lots of things to learn. But we've gone from, obviously there was me on my own in the early days. Now we've got 3 staff members, and I get the numbers of dogs wrong every time. So I've got so 7 dogs. um,
Amazing. So remind us, because you obviously work very closely with Pippa, who was
yeah.
Hope's dog. Pippa has also had a daughter called Stella, is that right?
Oh, well done. Yeah. Yeah. So Stella, if you can see her, she's underneath Pippa, the black dog. So Pippa had one of Hope's desires for Pippa was that she would have a litter of puppies. So in fact, it was in lockdown. We had Pippa have one litter of puppies. Pippa didn't really like being a mum very much, I have to
Oh.
say. She loves Stella, but I think we knew instantly she raised a litter well. There's 5 beautiful puppies came out of it, but we knew that she wasn't cut out for this motherhood lark. So we kept Stella, and her 4 boys went to lovely homes. Um, and then Elsa came along who is with my mum actually. So mum's in the purple with a little cockapoo. Um, and Elsa came along initially to our house. But Elsa didn't like being in a house full of dogs. She likes being a princess. So she now lives with my mum and dad. and is treated like the princess she thinks she is. But Elsa works with adults. His mum was a palliative care nurse and a district nurse in her previous roles and has got extensive um, experience working with dementia patients as well. So she does a lot of that type of thing. And then Truman at the top left is our big Labradoodle. He lives at our house too, and he's
He looks full of energy.
oh, he is. And at the moment, he can only work in schools. He's got too much energy to go. You couldn't take him to an old people's home because he wouldn't sit still. He likes to go into schools and play, and have fun with the children. And then at the bottom, you can see Tam with her dog Jackson and Bex with her dog Nala. And they're fairly new to the team, but they both work in schools with their dogs. And both their dogs are 6. So
It's
they're,
amazing the range of types of breed of dogs you have, but
yeah,
also how their different personalities work well with different groups of people.
yeah. So that comes back to making sure that when you take a dog on, you're considering the environment that the dog is going to be working in. So you're looking to see whether the dog enjoys reacting with people and which environments it's going to like being in. So as I've just described with Truman and Elsa prefers working with adults. She's happy enough with children. She doesn't dislike children, but the chaos that comes with going into a school was a bit much for her. Whereas you take her into an environment with adults and she's perfectly fine. You take Elsa into a dementia care home, she's happy and she'll just sit at the feet of the person or even sit on the knee if she's allowed. Um, Whereas Pippa, she's grown up in schools. She absolutely loves working in schools. She's great on a one-to-one with an adult, but she does not like dementia care homes. It's just different dogs, and we're very conscious of that. And so often when somebody rings me up and says, we need such and such, could you come to our office, or could you come to our care home, or could you come to our school? We'll say, well, this particular dog is probably what we'll bring on the day, and this is why. Um, so it's really important, and we always consider that.
Ali, there's a massive scale of need in our country when you think that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem of some kind every year. That's in
Absolutely.
England alone.
Yeah.
Tell us what you aim to do in these sessions, because I imagine, and it's important to say, this isn't dealing with individuals who are at a crisis point.
Sometimes it is actually. There are times within schools where a child will be in crisis and you just sit and you wait. Our service is currently an emotional and mental health support service. So there are different levels of intervention, and currently we're at I don't like saying the lower level, but the early stages of intervention. So for the most part, what we're doing is trying to help clients develop strategies for coping with life. And that can be in all sorts of different ways. Um, Talking therapy, we do a lot of talking with the adult clients, a lot of working through how, where the client sits, what's happening in their lives and what they need. We do a lot of that. But with children, we'll do once we've worked out where they're up to, we'll look at ways to help with their anxiety or ways to help with their identity. And we do that in many ways. Sometimes it's with playing with the dog and tricks and games and things. Other times it's sitting with the dog and talking. And it's very much client led. So we don't go in with a prescriptive, this is how it works for this condition. We see what the position the client's in and then take it from there. Um, I think if you come to me from my faith point perspective as well, I am very much I believe Jesus can heal hearts. I've seen him do that countless times in my own life. And so I'm coming at it from the perspective of, I believe Jesus can heal the hearts that we're working with. So, silent prayers, not in front of the people that we're working with, but we do pray for our clients as well, away from the clientele, not in person. Um, because you know, that's where the change happens too.
Do you always see it as staying as a community outreach for where you are, or would you like to see other perhaps connections elsewhere in the UK?
So yeah, I'm hoping to sort of spread nationally. We are bit by bit growing in the northwest, and people are hearing of us. I do get inquiries from around the country, and if we got clusters of inquiries, we would be in a position now to be able to say, okay, for that number of clients, we could put a therapist in place, but it would take clusters.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that is certainly part of the plan. It's part of our long-term strategic development, we hope. But it's by the grace of God, isn't it? And we just see every step.
I wanted to come back to because earlier you said that you weren't sure it was something God had initially called you to. Um, how do you look to the future now and what clearly has been evident and the path that God has taken you on?
I think I've said all along, because it wasn't something I planned. It's been something that's developed. And it's something very much that I see as God's business. I This year has been a testing year for the business, if I'm honest. And I've faced a couple of times where I've thought, is this it? And I was okay with that, because actually, when we're in God, He gives and He takes away. That being said, I'm absolutely passionate about growing the business. And if by the grace of God, He gives me the grace to do it, I won't stop until He shows me it's time to stop. Um, so in terms of planning the next phases, we're now looking to do more work in the community on one-to-ones rather than just in organisations. We're trying to work with schools, health services, corporate settings, organisations, any organisation really where there's a need for mental health support. So bit by bit, our area of influence is growing, and we're just moving as the opportunity arises. We're moving into that area, and just very much trusting God for direction, because I think you can push doors. Sometimes they don't open. You just go, okay, that's not right. And then other times they open wide, and you walk through them. But I will keep going, and we will keep growing as long as God gives us the grace to do it. I think it goes back to a name. Hope was born for such a time as this, to bring hope. And why and how can she bring hope? Well, the only way she can ever, her name and her memory ever brings hope is because of the hope we have in Jesus. And I think, people look at my story and ask questions, and how did you cope? Um how did you get through it? And I think the only way I got through my stuff, and maybe the listeners can get through their stuff, is understanding that hope we have is in Jesus, and He holds us in His hands. And it's not strap lines or catchphrases. It's the genuineness of our faith and the peace that we find in Him, that despite us, not because of us, he gets us through and he takes us to the other side. And just like Hope had a journey, and her journey was a short one, the Lord's promised to get us and to carry us through our journeys until we complete the work, or he completes the work he started in us and takes us to our eternal destination. And that is where our hope lies.
Ali, Colley, it's been a real privilege, inspiring to hear your personal story and also Hope's. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
God promised Ali Hope would be well, and she is safe in God's everlasting keeping. A little girl whose friendship with Jesus gave her strength to endure her earthly trial with brain cancer. Hope looked to the future and saw others who would need help from therapy dogs like she had experienced. So heartening and moving to hear how her mum Ali has continued Hope's vision. You can discover more at hopestherapydogs.co.uk. Thank you for choosing to listen today, and my thanks to Rachel Gillis, UCB's producer of our Life Issues podcast. Do make sure you subscribe to the series.